Hey, welcome back. This is my second episode of Talkwatch. I'm not sure exactly why I went with that title. It just happened, and and I can't think of a better one. So here we are. And with me again is Volamel and Yiska. And this time we're going to be talking about the Overwatch World Cup and some off-season stuff, some theoretical stuff, and some actual things that have been going on throughout Overwatch League. Because I've been out for a little bit, went to TI, then had to do the major. Then ESL in New York was right after that. But I'm back. So, when I was thinking of the World Cup, I was thinking to myself, this is a contest to see who is actually the second best nation or the nation that gets to dodge Korea the longest, depending on how you look at it. So, that's how I've been thinking about it. And the 8 teams, so to say, have qualified through their different regions. Korea, Finland, US, Canada, China, Australia, France, and the UK. So, my first question to you guys is, who is actually the second best team after Korea?
Coming out with the fire.
I'm not going
That's
to
a
joke
good one.
around. We all know Korea is the best.
Yeah,
I
they
mean, of course.
definitely look really strong.
I'm a little disappointed in Joe that he isn't hip firing his answer.
Just straight China.
Straight China.
I do like China's change.
I think
to be fair.
I'd say USA.
USA. Jesus Christ. What kind of world have I dropped into where, like, USA is an actual legitimate contender?
No, they are not, but obviously.
Best of the rest.
Exactly.
All right.
So, which other team would you... I mean, the other team for me is... Obviously, to me, there's only 3 teams you can name.
Mm-hmm.
One is France, one is China, and then one is USA. Those are the teams that went 5-0, and those are also the teams that convinced me the most in their level of play. China has some room to grow, even.
Definitely.
I would say if I was to evaluate what the highest level of play was there, I would say USA. I would say, though, that I think China has a bigger chance of beating South Korea than the US does.
I guess it
And
depends.
let's also keep in mind, I think I'm being a little bit unfair to Finland, but I think they might have even overperformed in their game against South Korea. So I'm not sure if they have the chance. But yeah, you would probably have to count them in towards the better teams.
They look pretty strong. I think it all depends on exactly. That first match is going to be a big test on exactly what some of these teams are going to be running, because there is a big divide between like NA and EU, like regional metas, where EU is very much about goats and how this like 3-3 setup is run, and this is the strongest comp you can run at the moment, and they're we don't mess around with Doomfist and Songbird. We can beat that and all that stuff. Whereas NA is all about the Doomfist Songbird. Like, this is the counter to goats. Like, goats isn't actually the best comp to run. So once we see France, China, France is probably I'd probably wager them probably the strongest tank team outside of maybe Finland, I would imagine. And then Canada, again, coming from the NA region. They're going to want to run these counter tank compositions. So from that, we'll get to see exactly who or what is run.
I mean, this is a classical example, and I think we have had this quite a lot of times with EU as well, is that people are saying, oh, these uncultured swine are still playing these tank metas, Like, they're coming with their clubs while we are having these cruise missiles here. But then EU just shows up next to the guy that presses the button for the cruise missile and just lobs him over the head. It's like, this is not fair. Nobody said, yes, now, right? Well, EU's there,
ready.
right? Like, that was the case, for instance. I think that is a ever reoccurring thing, almost since
The beginning of Overwatch.
those forgotten land tournaments in the West that we had, where EU was sort of underrated and then had some meta interpretation that actually prevailed in direct contact, and then that it was also the case with British Hurricane against Fusion, I suppose. So
it does happen a lot. I noticed throughout every esports game, where like in a direct clash between NA and EU, NA is always going to be the region is like, man, those EU guys, they don't know what the fuck they're doing. They don't got it right. And then when it actually happens, EU just smashes them because they have a better understanding of the meta or a team play or whatever. And then NA is like, God damn it. Well, next time we'll completely forget about this. And then when the cycle repeats again, we'll be like, man, those EU guys, they don't know fucking nothing. And then EU smashes them, and then here we are again and again and again. Which is why I was surprised.
That's the beauty.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of esports. Because you can't cheat the system in esports, right? You have like objective win conditions, and in a world like America, where everything is about aesthetics, not actual performance, right?
Yeah.
Like, where you can always move the goalposts. Ah, yeah, I meant to do that actually while doing good. Well, or looking good. Like, this doesn't work in esports because, like, if a 4-gate kills you, a 4-gate kills you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's basically how it goes. That's why I was like so surprised. Like you went with US. I was like, because to be fair, I haven't actually seen a bunch of these games, but my first instinct is always to bet against America. The only exception to that happened to be PPD, and that's because like he forced me to believe in him. It's like after like an year of whooping everybody, he's like, okay, fine, you're the real deal. But for the rest of everybody else, it's not quite as clear cut.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, you did bring up a team I want to talk about, China, because remember the first season of Overwatch, everyone was like, man, these Chinese teams, they're going to be so good. You guys just watch, and then they went 0-40. And during that time, everybody was wondering to themselves, is there really just zero talent in China? And apparently they're doing pretty decent here. So what do you guys think of the talent on this team now that we've actually seen them in action?
Well, I'll be the first to jump in defense of my my newly proclaimed favorite country. I think that Shanghai was pretty poorly built, to be fair. So I wouldn't, as they are the sole representatives in the
Hey, I saw rankings putting Shanghai pretty up there for whatever reason.
Exactly. I saw them as high as like 4th, and I'm like, I don't know about that, man. Like, this is still pretty like new. Chinese Overwatch at the time was still pretty like undiscovered and untapped. So, and then as the information came out more, and there was more rumors that like there was big no-nos involved. So
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
China overall, it's a great lineup. I had my concerns just because of how certain people had performed throughout the season, but and not to mention that it seemed like or there's a theme between a lot of the big teams where they just had a player that just hasn't been seen in a long time. Like France had Wins. And China has Leave, one of the former Miraculous youngster players, who was very, very strong and actually was absent during one of their major finals that they were kind of slated to win, and then kind of got banned for a couple games and then had to come back, and they just couldn't kind of reclaim whatever was missing, or maybe there was like internal drama. But all in all, this team's really, really strong. Front line's very good. DPS are stellar. Shy's, a lot of these names I'm sure we will be seeing in season 2 of the Overwatch League.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
they're at that caliber.
To me, like, their main tank Gushu is like, sometimes you have these players from China that are just transcendental in a sense, right? These Uzis, or do we say Uzi now, or do we say Uzi?
I think Uzi I sounds better, to be honest.
I agree. well, we all know who I mean, but I'm getting the vibes from him there because his primals were absolutely insane. I'm talking. Okay, this is obviously against different opposition, but at the same time, the efficiency on those primals was absolutely nuts. There were mechanical plays in there you couldn't expect to happen as reliably from the top 4 of the tanks. Some of those primes were absolutely nuts. There's almost like an element of fighting games in there, where depending on the frames and like your the angle of your crosshair, you can double hit melees before you throw them away, right? And this is apparently very hard to execute, especially also with your jump. This guy was doing it every single jump. It was absolutely nuts. He was top fragging for all but one game.
Yep. He was quite.
That's actually pretty ridiculous for a main tank.
Yeah, it's absolutely nuts. So
you don't see it often.
I mean, this guy is definitely, and if the rumors are true, and this is, I guess, a little bit of crossover into the other topic, he has been rumored to be part of this X6 mix-up with Seven, which is interesting. He would be the only Chinese player on that roster, and apparently he's learning Korean right now. Yeah, that could be pretty insane.
Like the last time we saw someone with these kind of statistics and with this kind of play style was Mono and Freaks Blue in the Apex era. We saw his stats and we saw him play, and this is about a year ago now. And we were like, this guy is the real deal. Like he's top fragging on Winston. Now Gushia is doing this on Reinhardt and Winston, which is like doubly impressive. Because yes, he has fantastic juggles on Winston. Yes, he has, amazing leap accuracy. But he's doing it on Reinhardt as well. Again, that kind of hints more at what compositions they're running rather than just like super crazy mechanical things. But he's like the team is kind of facilitating him a lot, and he's shining.
All right. Okay, so I'm gonna go a little bit off topic here, but have you ever heard of the Dave Chappelle skit about like the one white guy and a group of black people, and like he's the one guy you have to be afraid of because he had to do some ridiculous shit in order to get everybody else to respect him? The esports version of that is Koreans respecting anybody outside of Korea, and the first version of this I remember was back during 2012 in StarCraft 2, where like literally every Korean was like, Stefano is like the truth, because he was changing the entire metagame of how you're supposed to play Zerg versus Terran and Zerg versus Protoss. And so everybody was like, Stefano is the real deal. And this came like unsolicited. Usually you have to get the Koreans to talk about it. They're like, no, fucking Stefano's fucking crazy. But the fact that you're telling me like an entire Korean team accepted and wants this guy tells me like this guy is probably pretty fucking good. Like,
keep in mind, for the viewers, this is not what the Koreans say in interviews, because what Koreans say in interviews is either psychological warfare in which they overhype the ego player like way too high, and it's never actually accurate what they're saying. It's more that if they themselves come out and praise someone, like it's definitely not if they're being asked for input.
Yeah, if it's unsolicited, like you're just talking about something else, and they're like, you see that fucking Stefano guy though? What the fuck was that? Like this, the fact that like you don't even have to say anything. Like the fact that they have the choice of every Korean tank right now, and they're like, no, we need to get this Chinese dude, even though he speaks a different language. Like that's saying something crazy, right? And like I guess here's a funny topic that I wasn't going to talk about, but there is this weird thing going on in Overwatch. It's been similar to League of Legends, where like you completely take the wrong value out of a Korean interview. So I'm going to explain a very important character into understanding the Korean interview. His name was I Love Uv from Brood War. And this is a guy who legitimately lied in every, I don't want to say lied, but he exaggerated every single interview. And the whole point of the exaggeration of every single interview was to fuck around with the other guy's mentality so that he could get an edge in the actual competition. Now, whether that's making them overconfident or making them think he actually had something else planned up his sleeve or whatever, that's actually how the Koreans think when it comes to interviews. Like, for them, the game actually starts way before the actual game starts. So, don't ever believe at face value what a Korean is saying, or you'll be like, Fisher, I'm not joining Seoul Dynasty, and then 10 seconds later, oh, I'm back in Seoul Dynasty, guys! Like, okay. Right. Yeah.
For sure.
All right, so let's see here. Is there any? The United States seems pretty straightforward. Like except for Zachary, I think most of these guys are pretty well known. All right, what about France? Let's see here. Is there anybody? I can't believe Wins came back. First of all.
Yeah.
Like
That's a resurrection, surely. Yeah.
yeah, because I thought if he was ever gonna come back and be out as a coach or something, but I guess he's coming back as a player
Mm-hmm.
No, it didn't
or
look
maybe player coach.
terrible.
Who knows?
Look quite okay.
Yeah, maybe.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, maybe he saw a TI as like, man, if fucking Matt could do it, if he can win fucking TI as a coach, maybe I can get into Overwatch League as a player coach or whatever. Who knows?
It's possible.
But all right, to segue between this and the off season, like the other aspect of the World Cup, or actually, I think the biggest aspect of it is like I said this before. I keep saying it. I think World Cup is a better version of contenders than contenders, if only to get your name out there. I don't think it gets you better,
Yes.
but it gets your name out there better, faster. Are there any players you think like did so well that they're going to get picked up because they played in this tournament so far?
That's a good one. I think a lot of the already favorites, I think because there's now so many people looking, I don't think anyone is really strictly overlooked anymore. I think a lot of people learn from like scouting that Fusion did, for instance, with EKO. That there are talents to be found outside, you know, those team structures or these past pro systems. So yeah, I think most of them have been fairly well known. Obviously, there are some players that are hyped by the community. I personally don't think any one of them should be considered better than equivalent players on contenders teams, especially in the top 4 of contenders teams. I don't think, especially Korea, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And even like even should I? Well, whatever. He's basically retired anyway. Basically, last year when we did the Overwatch thing, the Overwatch World Cup thing, like I thought the most overhyped player during that run was Jake. Right? Like
That's fair.
Like I'm trying to think if there was anybody else more overhyped than he was, because like people were saying to me like, oh yeah, he's gonna be right up there with the Koreans. He's gonna be the best player in the league, and then it turned out he wasn't even the best player on his team, or the second, or maybe the third, depending on how you looked at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, he had a pretty good performance at World Cup back then.
Yeah.
But it's more, I think more people, that's just, I mean, it's so hard to find clear thinking, because I think what most people actually wanted to express
Was patriotism.
it's weird how that works. It goes from, wow, Jake really sat down and improved his performance, to, oh, he must be the best player in the world right now. Like that, because there's skill discrepancy, and also he must continue exploding like this. There are no diminishing returns on skill gain. It's always going to skyrocket. At some point, he will play by himself on 6 PCs. Like, I think, I think the notion that he was going to compete with absolute like top talent. I mean.
That basically died, right?
Yeah, I guess on some on a hero, we can talk about that, but yeah.
All right, just curious because like that's always another weird thing if you're talking about American esports specifically. It's not as much in Canada, but it can like bleed over. So I see sometimes where like you see like a really good like potential talent. He has like a standout tournament, standout series, and like the fan base is more like. The nice way to put it would be optimistic. Let's go with optimistic. They're optimistic about this guy's chances, but in reality, it just doesn't bear out. So, I mean, that's just how it goes sometimes. Yeah. All right.
For sure.
I have this theory. I don't know if you know that article from Nassim Taleb where he talks about that surgeons shouldn't look like surgeons. So basically, the idea is if you have a guy, so you have a life-threatening illness, you need to be you need to get surgery, and you have the choice between 2 guys, and one is the typical doctor, has like the white coat on, like, you know, what you would think a doctor looks like, and a guy in the same position that looks like a butcher, basically, with like wide forearms, is tattooed, and might have like a wonky eye, whatever. You should always pick that guy, because in order for him to get the same position, he would have obviously outworked and outperformed the person that that
did all the
the
social
normal
cues.
looking doctors,
Yeah.
right? The people that fit the bill, so to speak. I think the same can be said about pro players and selfies, dude. Like if a pro player takes too many selfies and is like his market value is elevated by that, and is also very marketable, and has the same sort of salary or the same position on the starting roster, whatever, you can pretty much assume that he's worse than the nerd kid that nobody really knows about, you know?
You can't get him started on aesthetics because then he'll divulge into like his weird hand fetish of jewelry. And he could write you a whole 40K word like dissertation on, you know, what Semler hand is and how it applies to each and every player.
Semler
So
hand?
don't get like
the
don't get him
caster?
started. Yes, like the caster. This is his definition, not mine.
Okay.
Well,
I've got an idea for my next podcast. I just have to get Semler on, and I'll ask about it. All right. But yeah, I actually totally agree. Basically, the guy with like zero marketability, but he is somehow so good that they gave him like the equivalent shot or choice. Basically, means he's probably better. Like that's generally how it goes. And like if you want a perfect example of this, I'll give you Naniwa from StarCraft 2. There has never been a player as controversial or seemingly as angry as Naniwa was during his prime. Like if this was literally any other player with less amount of skill, he wouldn't even be on a team.
yeah, I agree.
But the fact that he was so transcendent, like literally forced everybody to have to follow him because he was that great. So that's kind of like the equivalent there. Obviously, like Naniwa is like a pretty interesting figure because he is very similar. I'd say to like, well, nobody's quite as extreme as him in Overwatch as far as I can tell, but maybe Effect, where like a lot of the bad things about this guy also like create all the good things about this guy. Right, so it's a very interesting sort of mix. But all right, I guess we can move on to the off season. And so when I think of the off season, the first thing you actually have to think about is the Korean overlords, right? Because here's how I would say it. There are currently two paths in front of you as an Overwatch team organization. On one path, you can do the hard work. You can get the organization up, infrastructure up. Then you do the scouting, and then you find the right team culture. You find the right synergy, or you can get 6 Koreans. And there are so many Koreans in this game that like basically I'm pretty sure this is like close to like if League of Legends is on one side where like literally every Korean is playing it, and on the other side is like StarCraft 2 where like a very small handful of players are playing it. This is further to the League of Legends side where I think you could literally like cycle through all the way down to like the 200th best Korean and they'd still arguably be as good as or better than a bunch of the other guys, except they come with prepackaged cultural things like, oh, I'll always listen to my elder. Oh, we'll always play together as a team. Oh, I'll always do 12 hours of work. So with the off season like coming, right? Should everybody fire everybody for Koreans?
I recently did a podcast, Watch the Overture with Thorin and Wolf. And he even said that when he goes into these team houses, he sees structures that are so pre-Casper that he thinks we haven't even seen anything. It's not even that Casper has to come in, but the money has to come in. And as soon as the money comes in, we haven't even seen anything in terms of talent development, what might happen in Overwatch in comparison.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
Keep that in mind while 50 Korean players enter the Overwatch League this season, right? Mm-hmm. And keep in mind also, if you look at, I recently looked at the distribution in playoffs. The nation that sent the second most players into playoffs, I forgot who it was, but they were at 5. Canada. Was it Canada? Yeah, I think it was Canada.
Like Canada with 5, and then it was like...
Yeah, I think Huck did it.
Yeah, and then USA 2, Koreans 33.
Remember, they can't aim though.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, I mean, basically. Oh, by the way, we shouldn't omit one thing. you shouldn't just bring the Korean players. You should also bring the Korean coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys also have a pretty good track record now in the Overwatch League.
Yep. All right. Actually, me and Wolf do come from a similar background-ish, because we were both there at the very beginning of StarCraft 2. So we both, and I'm pretty sure Wolf already knew about it from Brood War, and I already knew like bits of it from Brood War, but like the fact is like StarCraft 2 actually transitioned from, because basically Overwatch right now, the Korean league, the Korean version of it is very like, he calls it pre-Kespa, but, or I forget the exact term of it now. I forget, but basically there's like a bunch of teams, like ESF, that's what it's called, Esports Federation. Mm-hmm. That's basically what it calls it. And like I have the perfect metaphor. It actually comes from a player who played in both variants. He played in ESF and he played in Kespa. And basically this is how he described it, right? This player's name is Parting. It's already out there, like one of the all-time great Protosses. But basically here's how he described it. Kespa was like a fucking zoo. And you had a schedule, you did things right, and then you're thrown out there as like a perfect showpiece. And the best part about this is like the implications of like how it goes down. It's like, oh, and then they when your time is done, they kill you, replace you, and then you get another one, and it's as if the show doesn't like change, because that's kind of how the Korean system is. Like they don't give a fuck about your burnout, because there's 100 other guys that want to be you, right? And then here's the difference. In ESF, he called it the fucking wild. Like, you're free to do whatever the fuck you want. And you have unlimited freedom. And here's the funny thing. If you compared ESF to organizations to like a majority of like the non-professional like Western orgs, they were actually like 2 or 3 times ahead just in terms of pure infrastructure. And they weren't even doing anything that special. They're like, okay, here's like a basic schedule. Here's like some coaching, here's like some scrims, and here's a team house. Like that's all you get, right? That's kind of how it went. So the difference if Kespa joined would be fucking massive, basically, is what I'm saying. Because they will like they will literally, like, if these players were horses, they would literally ride them to the death. So that what would happen is like the next horse over would realize, oh, I guess I have to do that too, and then just keep riding them all the way to death. And there's unlimited horses for the Kespa or to run through, and you would get like the highest peaks anybody's ever seen, even though they wouldn't last particularly long for most cases.
Yeah, I thought your zoo analogy of Kespa would go to at some point the zookeepers just open all the gates. And whatever animal comes out of there is the strongest and will reign over the kingdom. Some
sort of Overwatch battle royale.
This is even better, because here comes the analogy to map pools. Because wherever they fight, like the killer whales, and they fight with the lions, they obviously not going to win on water.
Yeah, makes sense. It's fucking It's some crazy shit. Basically, I think it works for like 95% of the Koreans. Like, I feel like there's only like a very small percentage of it that doesn't work out for. And even those may have worked out. Like, it really depends on their mentality. Like, I know, for instance, like Tasia wouldn't have worked out. He just doesn't have like the drive to do something like that. Whereas maybe Life could have, because he did eventually join Kespa or whatever. But yeah, that's actually the background behind the entire offseason. Because now, here's my question is, now the offseason started, Overwatch League's done, what do you think is a theoretical way to go about building a team?
Yeah. So, I think the GM has to consider what coaching talent he has at his disposal. I think, honestly, getting a good coach first and throwing some money that way, if you indeed have the ability to evaluate that, which I found to be a problem in the past, but if you are a competent GM, you should probably be able to evaluate these things. You should probably start then with probably a Korean coach, if we're being honest. If you, by your owner group, are required to build a mixed roster for PR reasons, then I'm also bringing in a Western assistant coach. And, well, in general, I think last time I said I wanted to bring an entire course, I think this has now been sort of debunked in the sense that I underestimated how much time there is to develop the team before the Overwatch League actually starts. So currently we expect... Oh, damn. Can I say this? Yeah. F it. Overwatch League is going to start somewhere in February. And...
announcement.
And that's a lot of time.
That's okay. Not that many people watch it. I'm sure nobody will possibly catch this.
Can I say it? Screw it. Why not?
I didn't want to say the entire date, even though I could have. No, but the thing is, okay, so there's months left to build a team, to build a core, to build some, synergy between these players, or also a working relationship with coaching staff and whatever. If those are pre-existing, that's fine. I wouldn't overcommit on entire teams anymore, though. I would definitely, like, the people will be quick to point to the Spitfire example, where they brought in 2 entire cores. Well, how did that work out? Basically, both of them were split up in order to form a better final product, right? So I think if you're very skilled at selecting these and also developing these is probably even more important. I don't think cores are necessary anymore, even though there are cores that are very attractive. So, for instance, Runaway is attractive. Element Mystic is certainly a team to look at. KDP. Problem is, these teams are unlikely to go as cores, simply because of the buyout that you demand. So, obviously, this is like in an ideal world where your ownership group gives you infinite money. Your strategy looks very different than what it actually looks like in the current market, where the transfer prices are actually up by a lot in terms of, like, just by comparison. It's actually insane how much the rise is in terms of what these players are going to be paid and what these players will demand a transfer fee by. And this is more so the case between Overwatch League teams. So if you want to buy like a top level talent from a team from within the Overwatch League, you now definitely have to expect 6-figure price points, right? So this is definitely a restriction that you have to consider. So my ideal, if I was to build, was I get established Korean talent if my budget allows for that. I would probably start with a good coach, establish Korean talent. Then I would gamble on a couple of those players, which I can sign on 50K, have been largely possibly, or I can maybe offer them a better deal than the other team, not just monetarily, but also say, okay, you get one-on-one coaching because we have more coaching staff, or whatever it may be that this talent could desire, and try to gamble a couple of these bucks I have on these talents. I would probably not go over 9 players, I think. And if I had to have a mixed roster, I would probably need the main support or the shot callers to be of the nation that is primarily, so in terms of, if you have 4 Koreans, then you want your main support to be Korean because he has the shot call. I would think like this. Or if you have 4 Western players likely in your starting roster, then your shot caller needs to be Western. That's how I would generally model it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, mine would be fairly similar. Again, I think a lot of people don't realize that the GMs and the coaches don't have full control over who or what they sign. Sometimes they are kind of given certain hoops to jump through, and for that reason, the league isn't all, the best players ever in the world.
Do you think it's fair to say that Washington now is on a strategy of a no-hit run?
Nobody knows.
Rest in peace, Harsha. May his soul rest well. Right? Okay. So, all right. I am of a similar mind, but I do have an alternate strategy, which I think Paris is using. And basically, my alternate strategy is I would try to take over a region, specifically that's not Korea, and try to get all the best players within that region. Because if you do that, basically you become the main focal point for all rising talent within that region to want to join.
You're the biggest European representative, so you want to play for what team basically is Europe.
Yeah, or like I'd probably do the same thing in China.
Sure.
I might not risk it if it was like SEA, NA, or SA. I don't think they have enough talent necessarily to do something like that. But for Europe and China, I might make that gamble.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
There's definitely enough talent. Like if you could take like some complete European all-stars or even Chinese all-stars, you know, again, this is hypothetical. But if you could sign them all, yeah, they could be competitive. Are they going to win the league? Maybe not, but could they challenge for maybe a stage playoff? Could they, you know, make a nice run? Yeah, for sure. They could be a strong higher middle of the pack team for no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, because like,
I agree.
Yeah, basically it's like it depends on your money and your willingness to gamble, because sure. I think so long as Kespa doesn't join, I think there is a non 0% chance for a non like Korean majority team to win. So long as Kespa doesn't join.
Yes.
So
I mean, that almost happened, right?
Yeah, almost happened, right? So that's kind of how I'm viewing it. It's like, because even if you did go this mixed Korean route or even full Korean route, there's still no guarantee you're going to win anyway, and it's going to be harder going forward to be getting the best talent because you're going to be constantly fighting within Korea. So unless I have like an exceptional scout, so to say, like I don't know if I want to go down that like battle, to go down that fucking hole, like if I had the fucking MVP guy, and like what I mean by MVP guy is like the original person who created MVP the team, because that guy like literally found talent in every fucking game he ever joined. Like if I had that guy, yeah, I'd go down Korea, because he would literally find talent that nobody's ever seen, because he goes on fucking ladder and watches their games.
Yeah, you'd sift through open division and be able to pull out some all-stars, which could possibly still happen, to be fair.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that experience is like one of like a shonen series, basically, where every arc is like, oh yeah, we finally almost made it past the Koreans, and then those Korean coaches of StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2 say, oh, this is Overwatch, I exist too, and they like the gods descend upon us, and they also bring resources to the Korean players. It's like, oh no, it's a new benchmark. They're throwing galaxies now. What's going on?
That's exactly what's going to happen, man. You're gonna have to be like beyond. You're gonna have to be a literal once in a lifetime talent if you want to like beat them at that game. That's all I'm saying. And even then, they might pull off some bullshit like Flash or Jaedong or Faker, some bullshit like that, and you're fucked. Right? Okay, so. What was I going with? All right. Do you guys want to talk about Runaway?
Sure, we can talk about Runaway.
All right. So,
sure.
First question is, should one of these teams actually buy out Runaway as a fucking entirety?
Yeah.
Huh. So
it depends on where. Should they? Yes. I think we would both agree that they probably should.
Yeah.
Now, are they going to blow everybody's expectations? No. I think a lot of people are just super overhyping them. Are they going to be, middle of the pack? Yeah, probably. Could they be higher middle of the pack? Yeah, probably. But are they going to blow everybody's minds like I think the community wants them to? No, I'm sorry, they're not.
The amount of people who said that Runaway was currently the best team in the world.
Shout out to Slasher.
Barely won contenders. It was.
They should have lost, to be fair. Go rewatch that match and tell me that KDP didn't actively throw with both hands off the keyboard and their pants on their damn heads.
Hey, sometimes fear gets the best of us.
Oh, for sure. I'm not saying it shouldn't have. I'm just saying that's what actively happened.
By the way, I categorically, I have to make that caveat. I categorically disagree that they should be bought wholesale, because that would entail Hurek. I definitely don't think.
Okay, fair.
No. thing is, okay, so there's obviously so many factors to consider in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is buying Runaway the best you can do with your money? And we're not valuing at this point the return you would be getting.
Mm-hmm.
Just like upfront investment in comparison, like pound for pound, to the results you're probably going to get. That's definitely a no for me. Like, I don't think so. They are going at a very high market price, which makes sense because of the return you are eventually going to get. But even then, I think the DPS line could become a lackluster thing. I think definitely, yes, you're buying the best backline. You're buying a very good front line. So in that regard, I'm not as much concerned. And paying the amount of money that we've heard that they're paying for them is not ridiculous in the market now, or at least from what I've heard in comparison to
definitely higher. It's up on like the higher end, but it's not, completely unreasonable.
It's not, and also we are then comparing it to all current Overwatch League players, right? And the best Overwatch League players that could be traded are still demanding a way higher buyout than the individual Runaway piece would, because what the Runaway is still under the constraint of only being able to ask 100% buyout of what the eventual salary of the player will be. The Overwatch League teams are under no such constraints, so they could get infinite money for, I don't know, Striker or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So that this restriction is not in place, right? It's also, this is, by the way, just a small side tangent, it's very hard to anticipate how important experience from Season 1 is going to be. Like, even if I ask players and say, do you think these new contenders players that come in, do you think they have a disadvantage because they haven't gone through the mill of the entire experience? And some of them say, yeah, it could be hard, but then again, like, if the Korean system is as rigorous as we expect it to be, even though it's not as rigorous as it can be, or we know it to be, then it's not that fundamentally different, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's like, all in all, I think then, okay, let's talk about the returns. I think if you buy Runaway, can sneak past Blizzard some sort of way where you can sort of
give all those fans a little wink. Yeah, hey, we're Runaway, wink.
Maybe your colors are pink, maybe, right? Or like, it's like,
oh, we just happen to call ourselves the Runners. Completely coincidental.
Sure.
Just happen to have Runner's face on top of our logo. Completely coincidental.
Though I don't think that would actually fly with Blizzard, I think.
I think the colors could, though.
Yeah, the colors would.
The colors is a big enough, like,
I think so, yeah.
I see you. Buy my stuff.
Now, we're getting into that territory where, at what point, so how many players do you need minimum, and possibly also which players do you need minimum, in order to still have that pull of being the Runaway successor? So is it enough, for instance, to just have Bumper, Stitch, and Huxall, who are obviously the three longest members of Runaway and have been around since I think Season 2.
Yeah.
So, like, is that already the identity of Runaway, or do you need someone else?
I think it's just the majority. It's wherever the majority of those players go. So, especially if you can get the colors, like, for just looking at Runaway as an example, as just like a case study, that team has never really stuck with a core of a good amount of players. It's like Huxall and Stitch have kind of lasted a majority of the time. Everybody else has been interchanged, and
Bumper too.
Bumper's been moved around quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that whole brand is kind of built up on its own around one or two players. So I think, at its peak, and I do believe that this is probably like peak Runaway in terms of just like straight fandom, wherever the majority goes, and if they can actually get some sort of runaway-esque branding, I think is going to see a big fan increase.
Yeah.
Imagine if Runner and Flower pull it off that way, because it's 8 players. You cut them in half, and you go to every team and go like, "Oh, we're selling you Runaway," and you just cash in twice. Like,
pretty genius, to be fair.
Yeah.
I feel like it's probably just like a Theseus shit trick, whereas
yeah, exactly.
Or like you just slowly replace it, like, oh, it's still Runaway, still Runaway, still Runaway, but it's actually in actuality, like a majority of the players are different, but like they'll still consider it Runaway anyway.
Yep.
Like it just depends on the process of how you do it, because it's just like a mentality thing. Like,
yeah, that's the psychological trick that Blizzard wants to convince fan bases of, though.
Yeah.
They want to be like you to be a fan of the team, and no matter what parts switch around, you stay
a fan of a loyal
team,
fan.
right?
Yeah.
So, and my understanding now is that they have understood that this doesn't work as well anymore, and then they will promote, like, teams will have these profile players, and those will be sort of like the faces of the team, where their performance as well as their, you know, marketability is so constant and expected to be constant that you can build a brand with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of that, but Runaway is actually, in terms of how they have gone, even though they replaced so many parts over the seasons, but they still, in the mind of the fan, there's still this one entity, and it's Runaway.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is that still true? If Runner is not part of that deal, or Flowerin, or Huxel, or Stitch, like, you know, it's hard to say at what point there is significant doubt in the fans' mind where they say, I guess now it's not really my team anymore.
Yeah. Generally, though, it's if you want the trick, it's probably you have to keep winning. Like that will solve everything. But if you can't keep winning, then you do need like a majority of these people together for.
But that's the thing. Right? Runaway really only is one thing.
Yeah, I know, they're Kongs.
Second or fourth. Yeah, exactly. So it's, you know, they've got the utopia where if they win, great, and if they don't, well, it's Runaway. You know, what can you expect?
But like, they still need to get fucking second. Still need to get second. That's pretty hard.
Apparently, the second best thing to build a loyal fan base is to lose everything.
Yeah,
also true.
Shout out to Shanghai Dragons. Yeah, like, also, I didn't start this beginning, but if you're looking for a manager who can get you the 040, I'm your guy. Just pay me the millions, and I will show you how to fail as spectacularly as the Dragons did. I will make sure we don't even get a fluke win.
Yeah.
It'd be a show through and through.
Yeah.
You walk out like Florida Mayhem, you play like Shanghai. What's not to love?
Yeah. We do we do fucking pre-written apologies after we lose.
Sure.
It was so terrible. I can't believe X was bad. I was like, well, he wasn't even played that game. I was like, oh, don't worry about that. That's how it would go for my squad. Now, here's how will I explain this next bit. All right, I guess. All right,
here's hand puppets.
What?
To explain it, hand puppets.
Hand puppets and
always help me.
No, I lost my train of thought for a bit, but okay, here's my... All right, here's my question. How do you prepare for a season where you don't know what the patch is going to be like? Because if I... Like
That's the $1 million questions, dude. Right? Nobody knows.
Like here's a straight up question, because like I'm looking at Soul Dynasty, right? Sure. You got what I think is considered like one of the best tanks of the league, Fisher, but the difference between this team being number 1 and this team being like 4 or 5 or whatever is if they somehow get Anna into the patch, right? So how do you actually prepare for that? Because like, if you kick out Ryu Jae Hong and Anna becomes the most important hero, then you're kind of fucked.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So you try to.
But like, if you compromise and just get a bunch of like flex players that aren't necessarily exceptional at everything. Like, there are some that are exceptional at everything, but not all of them are. Actually, I think a majority of them wouldn't be, to be honest. But even then, like, you would just be like, you wouldn't be the best usually.
Yeah.
But I guess the question is how to best prepare for it. And I think the best way to prepare for it is to just kind of have incredibly flexible players that can consistently field what is needed. Because again, that was a lot of the big problems coming into the early stages of OWL was, you know, we didn't have this strong of a hero on, we didn't have this strong of a player on this specific hero. We didn't have, you know, this hero on this map. So they had to either draft strategies around that, or they just tried to run it and failed miserably. So to I guess the best way to answer that specific question, or that one game, how to best win at that one specific game, is to prepare for everything and try to cover all of your bases all at once. Are you going to win all the time? No, probably not. But I think that's the curse of the Overwatch League, is that your winners are always going to be the people who peak the highest and not be the most consistent.
Yeah, I mean that's a strategy, I think.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure.
You could definitely try to have a hard predict on the meta, because here's a thing about result asymmetry. If you finish in the bottom 4th, and unless you are as terrible as Shanghai Dragons was, like, nobody cares about that as much, right? So the loss you gain from not being average is not as high as the win you get for being way above average. So personally, if I think of taking a gamble, so for instance, let's say I don't shop for the most flexible players, but maybe I want to like take a guess on another Widow meta. Maybe I'll look at people like Happy from Contenders Korea, who mostly played Widow, but played a nuts one, right? So like sort of these types of scenarios, right? I mean, it's hard to say if that's this asymmetry is sort of still true in a franchise scenario, or indeed in one with localization. But yeah, that's definitely a strategy that one can apply to.
That's fair. If you want to take a gamble on that first couple stages and say, we think that, the patch is cycling this way, so we'll try to draft the strongest players leaning on that to get an early lead, and then try to, make changes as we see fit in the coming patches. It's hard to predict, but to best prepare for it, I think you need to cover all your bases. That'll probably gain you the best net results. Is it going to make you win? No. But is it going to make you 0-40? Probably not.
No.
You'll probably at least win a game, right?
That's the funny thing about Overwatch League, is that's actually the caveat. At least you will win one game. In other games, like, we'll win a few games. And this one's like, please at least win just one game.
Just win one. That's the floor. If you can win one, all right, we're golden. All right.
Yeah.
So here's the thing in the post Overwatch League world is apparently it's been revealed throughout a bunch of teams that there was like a shit ton of disharmony throughout like a bunch of these teams during this season. But I don't actually know that much about it. Like and what I mean by that is I don't know like the details of it. So what do they mean by like internal issues, right? Because that can go a wide variety of different ways. As in, you could be not practicing, maybe you just don't get along socially or whatever. But as far as I can tell,
could be all the above.
Yeah. But all right, here, give me my take. What do you think about that? Do you think that's actually a good thing or a bad thing? Because I can argue it either way.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you look at the record of teams that actually landed in playoffs, I think all of them had internal struggles, and not minor ones, but actually pretty big ones. So definitely all hybrid rosters face exactly what we were talking about earlier before, is that the player needs to the Western player needs to demonstrate a certain level of skill and also willingness to communicate with Koreans in order to be accepted. At some point, like, this split off somehow happens, and it's strange because it's even among the lesser skilled Koreans that they have a hard time accepting the Western player that is probably slightly better than them, but not much better. Let's say that. So I think per se there's like the idea of harmony is nice in order to get through the season sane, it's not necessary, at least empirically, to get through the season successfully. So
that's right.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to ask, and it's also like I don't even know if the Korean coaches actually help with that, because then you're introducing a new aspect to these Western players. We're not used to these social or these types of ways, right? In general, age doesn't play as big of a role in Western society as a whole. It's also, I mean, authority figures. That's why, like, if you go to basic training, some of those kids just have to be nailed into the ground before they understand what authority means. Like, they might have even had very unauthoritative teachers or whatever, or they were in school systems where you're raised to be an autodidact, or, you know, all these situations that could occur, which makes it harder for the Western mind to accept that. And I don't even want to generalize too hard, because, I mean, it's also mostly that these kids come from Western internet culture, so that's a thing in itself. But yeah, if I look at it empirically, to summarize, I don't think it's a necessity. It's probably a thing nice to have over a season this long.
Okay, would you deliberately try to cultivate it? Disharmony.
Ooh.
Because I can see a reason why.
Yes.
I can see a reason why you would do it.
Yeah, I think a certain amount, because as soon as there's no amount of disagreement,
yeah,
I think there's no growth.
No.
Like, muscles grow by being torn.
Mm-hmm.
Is basically my idea behind this. So there is, yeah, I think, for instance, I'm not sure, I haven't heard any troubles after Undead left with Shanghai Dragons, for instance. I don't know if that's healthy. There might have been, I'm not saying that, but if there weren't, then that's could be one of those factors.
Well, a
right?
great example of that, you know, after the Florida Mayhem split happened, a lot of them came out and said, yeah, we, you know, maybe we were too friendly. Maybe we were too kind of passive and giving feedback and saying, you know, oh, I don't like that. Maybe you could be here more. I have interviewed a couple of them, and yeah, it does seem to come across as, you know, we were just a bunch of friends playing games. And while that's a good thing, you don't really progress as far as you potentially could have, because you are just kind of complacent. So yeah, I would agree that, you know, manufacturing a little bit of a small kerfuffle every once in a while could definitely push things forward, for sure. I could agree with that.
Yeah, because I was actually thinking the Mayhem example, like, that's probably the reason why, like, when Swedish teams die, they die hard. Like, yeah, they die real hard. Like, they can't like get over their problems. Like, NIP and CS:GO, they literally repeated the same mistake for 2.5 years, and then now they're finally getting back up. Alliance literally died that way in Dota 2, and Mayhem died this way in Overwatch League. And another reason I was thinking about it is because I was watching an interview with Koei, and basically said this: in order to like get Pau Gasol to get to reach a higher level, like, he just fucked with him mentally. So like after they won, like after America beat his country in like the Olympics, he hung up like Pau Gasol's like silver medal in his locker, and he got super fucking pissed because he's like a super nationalistic person. He's like, what the fuck is this, Kobe? You a fucking asshole. It's like, yeah, you want to get a second place, or you want to step up? It's like, Jesus fucking Christ, what a psychopath. Yeah. But it worked. Yeah, it worked. Yeah. Right. So.
Well, to that point, like, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence to support that, like, some of the Koreans actually, like, screwed with their rosters during Apex practice, where they would just kind of bring in someone and bench, like, a mainstay of the team and just be like, all right, well, we're going to practice with this guy now. And, like, while that didn't, you know, maybe anger them as much as you know, other examples, it definitely, you know, put them on the back foot and say, oh, okay, well, you know, the team actually can win. You know, who are you not even being in the roster for Lunatic High and winning the entire, was it Apex Season 3?
Yep.
Didn't play at all. Like, that's a big, like, eye opener, and saying, wow, this team doesn't actually need me. So if I want to keep my spot, I better, you know, reality check myself.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, basically, I just want all teams to go to Civil War for my entertainment. So please,
pretty much, yeah.
Please.
I very early realized that I would have loved to be in an era where gladiator arenas were still a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I would have been down. Like, here's the thing. Like, on a side tangent, I am a little bit disappointed in like the team content coming out because I do want to see straight. Like, you ever see Breaking Point for Liquid League of Legends team? I want to see that shit because I'm pretty sure that some of that shit did happen in Overwatch League where like they're literally.
Valiant had it early. Valiant had
Valiant had that early on, and everybody got pissed. I was like, oh, this is fucking amazing.
No, this is great. Everybody loved it, and it was fabulous marketing because again, like it follows that same law where there really isn't like good or bad PR. There's just like harmful PR, and again, maybe they valued it as a little bit harmful to the players because of how close some of these fans are to the players. Yeah. So it could have been a little bit harmful, but it was, you know, the talk of the town. I mean, you know, the in and out meme still exists today, and that's, you know, months ago. So it was definitely a very powerful thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just my thoughts about that. All right, moving on to because I don't think any of the actual like as far as I know, none of the new teams actually got rosters. Some of them got coaches. I think like somebody got Wizard Young recently.
Yeah,
ish.
Was it DC?
DC.
That's
like I think it's been their only good move. But as far as I can tell, Wizard Young isn't going to win you games by himself. So,
unfortunately.
Well, they so far they're signed. So the people we know is Kate Mitchell. It's Wizard Young. It's Kate Mitchell is the associate GM.
Mm-hmm.
Wizard Young head coach. Avala assistant coach. And then MK analyst, some Norwegian guy that actually is quite well traveled in terms of Overwatch coaching, and Giannis as player. So this is what we know so far of.
That's at least confirmed.
DC.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Instead, I will talk about the great burning of a bunch of these different teams. So where should we start?
There's quite a few little fires we could start with.
Do you guys have a preferential fire, so to say? Like one that you think should have been burned down, or one you think they didn't burn down enough?
So do you mean one of the existing teams?
Yeah, one of the existing teams. All right, I'll start with one. We talked about Dallas Fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And I posed this as a question as to whether or not they should keep Effect, but they've decided to keep Effect. Because I feel like if you keep Effect, you have to burn out everybody else. But if they don't, but if you want to keep everybody else, you have to take out Effect. Do you think that's still the case? I think it's still the case, but
I think, well, there are some underlying behind the scenes stuff where I think now it can work. I think they are going to do that. So, and I think that, I mean, okay, so OG is actually legitimately a really promising tank player.
Mm-hmm.
With that, historically, you want a beast DPS to go along with. And a Korean one at that, right? So we had all these, like, basically all mid-season signings were basically trying to get that Korean main tank, Korean Tracer combination going. Now, obviously, Tracer not as big of a hero anymore, at least currently in the meta, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the synergy is completely broken off between those two positions, right? Mm-hmm. So with OG in effect, that's already pretty solid stone to build from. And then they also have Anko, who, by my estimation, was most definitely top 5 Zenyatta in the league. Yeah, I think that's a fair ranking at that point. So he is definitely the best Western flex support. Do you have any other names? I don't think that anyone comes really close to him in that regard. If I was to go down the list, it would be something like, and in no particular order.
Sure.
Okay, Jonak, Badosin, Neko or Aim God, and then I would say, who What was I just talking about?
Unco?
Anko, of course, yeah. Anko after them in just as a whole over the season. He also did it in 2 teams.
Are we specifically grading them only on their flex support skill, or can we bring in intangibles?
You can bring in intangibles.
Sure.
Because I would argue that Kareev probably has a very, very niche skill set that you're not going to find, that I think I would bump him up over Unko for 5th. Because he has shown to play a solid DPS. God forbid there be some sort of strange meta.
I think Kareev wouldn't be in the question. He would probably be in the lower half of flex supports in the Overwatch League. I think his Zenyatta was pretty poop. And I think we might not even see him on Zenyatta in the future. So
that's what I'm saying, is that like if we're specifically grading him on Zenyatta, or are we grading him overall? Because if you're saying specifically Zenyatta, then I would agree. But if we're saying like grading his skill set as a whole, I would kind of put him on the higher half of the end.
I mean, the thing is, okay, is it actually that valuable to have a guy that can flex to everything when that's never required? Like, if I was to play an RPG and I was to put like 5 points in every hero, then you're only ever playing a guy that has 5 points at every hero. But what if 80% of the season is played by a guy who has 8 points in Zenyatta and 7 points in Ana, and 80% of the season is these 2 heroes? How much does the 5 then matter, right? So, yeah. I don't know.
Yes, I would agree with that. You know, obviously, when you spread yourself too thin, you're not as useful. But when if your entire team is built around that player, I think that becomes much more important, that they can always be moved around, in the same sense that Jae-Hong was moved around, right? If he was this kind of leader for that team, it was important to have him within the team. And when he was taken out, they looked completely lost. So moving that kind of focal point, that kind of center pillar of a team around can be useful. And I think that they're very high on Kareev, and they like him quite a lot. And you know, he's been okay. Maybe his Zenyatta hasn't been as strong in such a dominant meta, but you know, his Ana is historically in Contender Season 1 back in 2017 looked quite good. His DPS, he can play flex tanks. You know, he will probably see quite a bit of use, and that's why he kind of edges out some other people for me.
I think in general, if you're talking about Dallas, the entire problem that Dallas faces is how do we okay, what about off tank? It's basically the question that
you got to kick out
Dallas
Mickey. He's been bad, right?
Well,
do you kick him, or do you kind of like
repurpose him?
Do you move him to the side, or make him like a player coach, or like a team
mascot? Is that what you're gonna say?
But just kind of like a coach that just brings everybody together with
mascot like happiness. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Mickey himself is quite flexible in what he can play. So I think he would also be one of those players that wouldn't be unhappy to have that second fiddle role. I don't think he's competitive anymore on flex things in general. So yeah, that's going to be a big question mark around Dallas.
It's like
who they can get, who they should be getting, and I think much of their season revolves around that, and I suppose also to a lesser extent what the main support role with Harry will look like.
Yeah, like here's my problem with Mickey is you guys are talking about him as if he's like Freakazoid on Cloud 9, the old version, or if he's like fucking Wolf right now on SKT. Like at some point, it doesn't matter what you do internally on the team as like a mood maker or as like an enforcer, you have to hit the fucking shot.
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I agree.
And I feel like he's already past that point.
Is like, for those specific examples, are those teams that are specifically built around him? And I'm not trying to say that Mickey is like the central pillar of Dallas, but I think he has put out a lot of fires that, you know, if by chance he isn't a part of that roster early on, I think that team does, you know, much worse.
Well, I mean, it was already pretty bad, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
It was already
So,
a dumpster
like,
fire. Like, but where they
would
were
never see that bell curve turn up towards the end of like stage 4, where they actually made playoffs, and that was like, wow, okay, they're actually like pulling their stuff together. Granted, there's lots and lots of changes that went into that to begin with, so it's not just specifically Mickey doing that. But I think he tried to keep the team at an even keel.
See, I would have.
I would agree though.
See, yeah, okay. I would have gone the other way. I think sometimes you just need to burn everything out.
Sure.
So
You could.
my pyromania is coming back.
That's the other avenue you take, is like you either keep this guy around to help, facilitate change and keep everybody on the same page, yada yada yada, positive, whatever. You go with that route, or you just rip it all down and build a new roster from scratch. And I think that both of those are perfectly fine.
But yeah, but to answer your point, like neither of them are technically focal points in their teams. Or at least they didn't see themselves as such. Actually, Wolf does. Wolf is like incredibly confident or / arrogant for what he does, but Freakazoid not so much.
But yeah.
I
mean, in terms of other fires, can we also talk about fires that are seemingly only dimming anymore? Like,
yeah,
I think, for instance, Florida Mayhem might still have issues in some regard, but like, I think they probably upgraded by a good bit so far. So I mean, there's still the potential. It's so hard to say what they're going to do, but I think, like, just from the moves they made so far, I think that they probably won't have a season as bad as their last one.
Well, I mean, I'll go ahead and say it's pretty hard to replicate a season as bad as their last one. Like,
yeah.
Not only because like there's just less games. It's like not even Shanghai Dragons should be that bad again. We'll see. I'm still holding out hope for the 068, but we will see. But yeah, they are actually a team that did follow my advice, burn everybody out. It doesn't matter, and replace everybody except Saya player. And like I said to Vic, awesome. Might possibly stay, and he did. So yeah. An awesome guy. But yeah, basically like get all the foreigners out of there as a StarCraft person.
The thing is, they sort of got like underwhelming Koreans in with Zephyr and Hagopion. At the same time, these guys, I mean, if there's still fire in them in the terms of redeeming themselves, I think it has to sting for Hagopion to have left an eventual winner of the Overwatch League. I think Zephyr was also like this guy has been trying to play on a top tier team for a while, right? So the fact that he's still in Overwatch League already is pretty impressive. So I think maybe they can pull something off. Maybe they could be. So realistically, what I think they will be landing at is lower third.
Like a lot. Here's my problem, I guess, with Mayhem. There's nobody else that matches Saya player.
Yeah.
Right? I don't even know why Saya player is still on this team. Actually. But I guess it must be a contract thing. Like, it must be ridiculously expensive. Must have, like, locked him in when they realized he's the only good piece. But...
yeah.
Probably.
But yeah, like... Even though they've upgraded, like... I don't think it'll get them much further than they were last season. But hey,
not when you have new teams coming in, that are they're touting, rumored very, very solid rosters. Like it's hard to kind of argue that a team of basically the B team of like 5 or 6 other teams is going to topple some of the new rosters. It's hard to wager exactly where to put them. But in a very pre-season power ranking, I'd probably agree somewhere between
bottom
10, 15 to 20.
Yeah, like
like somewhere in there.
Like if it was me, I'd probably have gambled on just new Korean players.
Sure, yeah, just like try to sign some contenders players that are of age and that look good.
Yeah.
I think that might still happen because they just signed Barehands, and is just his job description of assistant general manager but then head of scouting is already quite interesting. Now we don't know any specifics on Bearhands is the former GM of NYXL, so we don't actually know how much say he had in that. It's hard to say. One is inclined to think that it wasn't much, but we don't know, right?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe he's a negotiation talent and is able to lock these talents down, and that could benefit Florida greatly. Like, you definitely can't hold his record against him. I say that much. So, yeah, I'm actually looking forward to that, because there's definitely a lot of unsigned talent still in Contenders Korea where we haven't even seen their names really come up, and certainly also possibly some players outside of Korea. So we'll see.
We will see. Let's see. Was there any other burning down we should probably talk about?
Shanghai.
Okay, we may as well talk about Shanghai. I think I should have kicked everybody. Keep nobody alive. Kick literally everybody. I said this multiple times, and I'll keep saying it. Like, they are literally, like, mentally broken if they stuck with this roster, and I think that's what's going to happen.
I think they signed some very strong talents on top of that. So, one thing that one has to consider is some of those players came in fairly late. So they might not have the fullest of PTSDs. But yeah, I think actually Shanghai, there's like I take a lot of bets that like, if someone comes up to me and says Shanghai Dragons is going to be the worst team in Overwatch League next season, I'll take any bet he gives me. Like, I'm pretty sure that this is not going to be the case. I think their signings already look too good, especially, like, this would actually be absolutely insane what's currently being rumored in terms of DK being rumored from KDP. If they could nail that guy, wow. Like, this guy is legitimately probably a bigger talent than Ado. So, like, if that was the case, I could definitely see them. Wouldn't it be a crazy redemption story if they made playoffs?
Well, if that's what I was going to say. If the rumors are true that they're getting a lot of the KDP core and they're bringing the KDP coaches over, there's a good chance that they make playoffs. The Shanghai Dragons could be a playoff team very easily.
Yeah, but why keep all these old ass players that are,
they
like,
fill
broken
roles? You know, if we're gonna kind of extrapolate on this rumor, right? I feel like these players do fill roles in that specific team that are kind of
needed.
Needed for sure, but also are flexed off on. So, like, certain players will play, you know, are known for like projectile specialists, and then they kind of play diva. Like, you don't really need that person to play diva, but they can kind of play diva if there's like a meta like we have right now where they're forced to kind of play diva sometimes, and then they could, you know, make a strategy that kind of peppers in a little bit of Pharah, you know, specifically talking about right now. You know, that's a blessing and a curse at times. So if you have a more diva focused or a Zarya focused specialist like Aguri, or you have someone that's a little bit stronger on Monkey like Fearless, or if you have a hit scan specialist like Dia, as long as you can integrate them in the team, or you can just sell them off or trade them for another player, it doesn't hurt. I don't think it definitely doesn't hurt, especially if they're, you know, if they're cool with just chilling and maybe not getting starting time, if that, like, bare minimum.
Keep in mind, Dia signing might just as easily be that, because you have to trigger the 1+1 contract and say that we're keeping Dia in order to command a buyout fee in the future. Sure. If you were to, like, if you knew that 3 Chinese teams were going to come into the Overwatch League for some reason, the gamble that one of them will go full Chinese, and that then Dia is a player that's very much desired by them and could potentially be commanding a high buyout fee, seemingly high or relatively high for his level of play, is probably not a bad gamble, I would think.
I don't know. But that's the thing. That's the strange part, and maybe this is my ignorance on some of the contract stuff, is that with a 1+1, right? So they kind of just sign him on again for, you know, undisclosed amount of fee or a fee at all. Does he really see play time, and does he hold that same market value leading into the next season, so season 3? if he never sees play, that seems like a bad move, doesn't it? Or if they just kind of keep him on the bench, why do people want him then?
I mean, it's just a risk you take with that investment, I suppose. And
That's
I
fair.
wouldn't be surprised if he was on a minimum salary contract. So the gamble.
So anything above, right? No, I hear you for sure. That makes sense.
So,
Yeah.
And then Gregory and Fearless are pretty. Like those can be your franchise players, basically. I'm not sure if that's true in terms of skill as much, but they are definitely. I think they can survive in the Overwatch League or can hang in terms of skill at least for a couple of seasons, and then they are very marketable or have been seen to be very marketable or very much desired to have content created around them from the fan base. So I think it's hard to then let that go, I suppose. And then if you know you're already going to plan for a Korean team. Well, even if those players are not your starting players, they're creating value for you. Where, again, I'm not sure about Fearless, but I wouldn't be surprised if Gregory was signed on a fairly low salary.
Probably.
I'm not sure.
Well,
I mean, I guess it really depends, but
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, like the problem I have is like those three players can't really play with each other. Like their dysynergy is so fucking high. It is probably straight up the worst in Shanghai in Overwatch League Season 1. Like they're not on the same page at all. So that's why I was thinking about it. But I guess there's also the cynical way of looking at it. It's like, yeah, well, you're technically still a Chinese org. You probably at least want one Chinese player. It's one. Maybe that's one way to look at it. And if I was actually a Chinese team, I probably wouldn't want Dia anyway. I think he's been branded too much as a loser. Losing mentality. Like, you lose that many times, it's probably going to get to you eventually. Like,
yeah, it's possible for sure.
040 is pretty deep.
You seem to be very much impacted by
this.
Man.
I cannot believe people like are just rushing it off. Like, oh yeah, it's fine being an Overwatch League team and go 040. Like, what the fuck is this? I'm still super triggered about it months and months later. Like, this cannot be real, but sadly it is. All right. I think every other team has been pretty straightforward. They basically just cut off the chaff of everybody that they didn't use or need and wasn't sellable. Is that right? I still don't even know why they kept Coco around for so long. The fuel. Just
because Hastro is a decent guy.
Yeah, I guess Hastro is a decent guy. Yeah, just kept it around with Happy. Yeah.
No, I think, but like if Coco works socially, he can probably provide some value to the team. Obviously, let go of Chip Cyan. He probably should have a high enough skill level to find like maybe Paris, maybe even a team like Florida, to find his way somewhere on there, or Boston or whatever. Like, I think I would gamble on a Animeta with him and look at him very critically in scrims. And yeah, Coco was probably never going to be a starting tank or even a backup tank in the Overwatch League again. Like the requirements of main tanks, it's actually crazy how big the disparity between the best main tank and the worst main tank was in Season 1, and I don't think this is going to be any less the case, especially with Hammond coming in, that the main tank might have to play as well. So yeah, these are tough requirements towards the main tank position. So keeping Coco around as a coach is, I think, just, you know, a nod, or actually maybe he is very good analytically. But yeah, obviously their history goes back like 2 years. And at the same time, you could say the same thing about Grim Reality, who became an analyst mid-season, or Verbo, right? Like, these guys have now also been cut, as far as I remember.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking of like the fact that he was as a player for like the entire time until the end when he switched over to coach. It's like if you like, because I think it just didn't make sense from their point of view. It's like because he wasn't giving any value as a player. Like he gives value as a coach, maybe. Like nobody can know really, but maybe he does. But like he was a player for a majority of that time, right? So I was like, what was he exactly doing? Like what was the point of that?
He probably just did the coaching thing, I would imagine, because I mean, if you don't need the slot and you can't force the guy out of his contract and tell him, oh yeah, you can be a coach with us, but for 15K less a year when you're already only making like 50, which I don't know if that's the case. I think probably Envy was probably pretty well
generous,
paid,
yeah.
I would imagine. Yeah, it's probably not a feasible move to then just go, please be coach for us for less salary. So I think that just makes sense to the org and to Coco himself to not trigger the 1+1 and then just move him into a coaching role.
Yeah, all right. So I think that about covers it, unless you guys have any other team you want to talk about. I think they're pretty well covered. I think Korea will win everything from now on. Just my prediction. They will win the World Cup. They will win the next season. And next season after that. And then when the Kessler comes in, they will win it. They will win the first, second, and third slots. So just letting you guys know. You guys have any shout-outs?
Not personally.
All right.
Just watch the video. Give Stucci that fat comment and subscribe.
Yeah.
I'm going to shill for you.
All right. And I will shill for Harsha. Rest in peace. Hopefully you get another job. All right.